A cool breeze brushed against my face as I walked through the halls of the Jiangdong Provincial Committee compound. It was autumn, and the trees outside were dotted with yellowing leaves. I headed straight for the archives on the fourth floor. Inside, a woman in her 30s with fair skin and glasses was methodically organizing files. This was Linyu. She was quiet, intellectual, and spent her days surrounded by years of government reports, leadership speeches, and official red-headed documents. The rhythmic click of my leather shoes echoed in the quiet room. I was 23, tall, and had a refined look that made most people mistake me for a college student. "Xiao Chu, what are you researching today?" Linyu asked without even looking up. She knew it was me just by the sound of my steps. This place didn't get much foot traffic, and I was a regular. "Good afternoon, Linyu," I said with a grin. "Research is a strong word. I'm just here to soak up the wisdom of the old masters. You know, studying their past achievements to raise my own ideological awareness." "My name is Chu Dongang. I worked in the provincial committee secretariat and held a master's degree, a rare and prestigious qualification at the time. I was handsome and highly educated, but I had entered the workforce just as the government stopped guaranteed job assignments. To get a position, you had to pass the civil service exam and fight for a spot. Then stay here and soak it in," Linyu replied casually, returning to her work. She was used to me. Over the past year, I'd spent countless hours here. Unlike others who borrowed files and forgot to return them, I always put things back exactly where I found them. I preferred to sit quietly and take notes in my own notebook. When 5 o'clock hit, I said goodbye to Linyu and headed back to the secretariat office. To my surprise, the place was empty. Everyone had slipped out 30 minutes early. "What day is it? It's not even quitting time yet," I muttered to myself. I sat at my desk and began organizing the notes I'd taken in the archives. It was a habit of mine. In the office, I was an outsider. The others in the first secretariat department liked that I stayed quiet and out of the way. There were two reasons for this. First, my degree wasn't in Chinese literature or journalism, so they looked down on my writing skills. Second, they were intimidated by my high education and worried I'd swoop in and steal their glory. I was never asked to write the big speeches for the top leaders. I only handled the scraps. They didn't realize that for a master's student who had survived a thesis defense, a government speech was child's play. I didn't mind the isolation, though. Research requires solitude, and I was used to being alone. I was deep in my notes when the door pushed open. I snapped to attention. "Secretary General." It was Zhao Zifeng, the Secretary General of the Provincial Committee. He looked around the empty office, his brow furrowing for a split second before he smoothed his expression. "Xiao Chu, getting settled in?" he asked, his tone casual but observant. "Doing all right, sir. Just taking some time to soak in and improve myself," I replied. Zhao Zifeng was one of the few people in this compound who actually looked out for me. He had transferred from Yuebei province a year ago to be the vice governor, eventually taking over as Secretary General last October. My journey to this desk had been a nightmare. After I passed the civil service exam, I was supposed to be assigned to the Provincial Development and Reform Commission as a deputy section chief. It was a great gig, but at the last second, someone with better connections snatched the spot. Then, the organization department tried to send me to the Jiangming City Education Bureau as a section chief. They rejected me, claiming they had no openings. They tried the Environmental Protection Bureau next. They were even more blunt, saying an economics major had no business in their department. I went through a revolving door of over 200 departments: police, water resources, culture, tourism, you name it. Every department head was afraid that a young guy with a master's degree would eventually take their job. Finally, Zhao Zifeng got fed up. He pulled me into the secretariat and bypassed the red tape to give me a full section chief rank. People were jealous, but Zhao Zifeng shut them down. "If you don't like it," he told them, "you find a place for him." So, I had spent a year in limbo, working a job that didn't quite fit my background in finance and economics. "By the way," Zhao Zifeng said, shifting gears suddenly, "have you talked to Secretary Hua's daughter lately? How's that going?" I felt my face heat up. He was talking about Hua Jiqing, the party secretary of Hefeng County. His daughter, Hua Yueran, was a Chinese teacher at a local middle school. She was 3 years older than me. A while back, Zhao Zifeng had played matchmaker, swapping our phone numbers. I haven't called her yet. I stammered. Zhao Zifeng's expression darkened. What? Is she not good enough for you? No, it's not that, Secretary General. I trailed off. The truth was, I was self-conscious. It was just me and my mother. I didn't have the family background to match a powerful county secretary's daughter. I'm just worried she won't think much of me, I admitted, looking at the floor. I'll try to call her soon. His face relaxed slightly at that. But I knew Zhao Zifeng hadn't come here just to talk about my love life. I had been in the highest levels of provincial power long enough to develop a bit of political intuition. Xiao Chu, he said, his voice turning serious. You've been in the secretariat for a year now. It's time you got some real exercise. I straightened my back. Please give me your instructions, Secretary General. I gave Zhao Zifeng a respectful nod. For a year, he hadn't given me a single real assignment. It wasn't entirely his fault. Our provincial party secretary, Kong Chaolin, had a full-time secretary named Song Gang. Song Gang also ran the secretariat. By tradition, he handled all the drafts. Zhao Zifeng didn't like Song Gang, but he usually stayed out of his way. I wasn't a fan of Song Gang either. He acted like he was the most important man in Jiangdong province. He walked around with his nose in the air, looking down on everyone. Most people hated him, but nobody said a word. He was the gatekeeper to Secretary Kong. If you wanted to see the boss, you had to go through him. But things were changing. Secretary Kong had been in the hospital for months. Word was he might retire to a secondary role. The organization department had already spoken to him. Because of this, Kong had arranged for Song Gang to become the head of Songqing County. With Song Gang gone, the governor, Zhang Jiehui, was handling the heavy lifting, and Zhao Zifeng was managing the coordination of the provincial committee. Listen, Zhao Zifeng said. Early next month, Jiangdong is holding a province-wide economic conference. Secretary Kong needs to give a keynote speech. I want you to write a draft. I blinked. He was giving this to me? You've been in the secretariat for a year, he continued, handing me a folder. It's time to see what you can really do. Zhao Zifeng liked me. I was highly educated but kept my head down. He hadn't given me work before because he didn't know if I could actually write. He hadn't even planned to give me this task today. He was just passing by, saw me sitting there, and decided to take a chance. Usually, a major speech like this went to the seasoned veterans in the research office. Writing for the party secretary was a rare, high-stakes opportunity. He didn't give me any hints or instructions. He wanted to test my raw ability. Write it well, he said simply. You have 5 days. Then he walked out. I sat down and spread the materials across my desk. My heart sank. There was no outline. The folder was just a mess of economic figures and party-building data from the last 2 years. I lit a cigarette and stared at the wall. I hadn't smoked before taking this job, but the long hours and cold bench had turned it into a habit. This was my shot. Secretary Kong was coming out of the hospital, and everyone would be submitting drafts. Usually, they'd pick the best parts of several drafts and stitch them together. I didn't want to be a footnote. I wanted my voice to be the one they chose. If I failed now, I'd be stuck in the shadows forever. I spent the rest of the day organizing my thoughts. By the time I got home that evening, I was buzzing with energy. I ate a quick dinner, took a shower to clear my head, and sat down at my small desk. I lit another cigarette. A party secretary's job is to set the vision. He doesn't manage the details. He points the way. He manages the political climate and leads the people toward a better life. That was my starting point. Vision, goals, and people. I grabbed my pen. How do we reach those goals? We had to liberate our thinking. We had to break the chains on our productivity. I thought back to my studies and my research trips to places like the United States. The West used machines to multiply their power by 1,000. We were an agricultural province. Our advantage was cheap labor, but labor alone wasn't enough. We needed technology. We needed the machines. If we couldn't build them, we had to buy them. If we couldn't buy them, we had to bring the foreigners here to build them for us. Foreigners are capitalists. They only care about profit. But we needed their tech and their money. If they built factories here, our farmers could become workers. Their income would jump 30%. I wrote it down, attracting investment. It sounded simple, but I framed it as a strategic battle plan. I was so excited I wanted to scream. I wasn't just writing a boring, dry report. I was writing an economic manifesto. My experience abroad gave me an edge no one else in the office had. I mapped out the structure. Part 1, a summary of the past year. Part 2, the new direction, liberating productivity. Part 3, the big goals, the pie in the sky, numbers everyone wanted to see. Part 4, the vision for the future. It wasn't just a speech, it was a weapon. I wrote late into the night, the words flowing onto the paper like a river. That night, I slept better than I had in a year. The next morning, I walked into the secretariat office. There were 5 of us in the room, 3 men and 2 women. My desk was in the far corner, the most invisible spot in the room. I sat down and immediately started polishing the draft, ignoring everyone else. A few minutes later, Zhao Zifeng walked in. He gathered everyone to announce the assignment for the economic conference speech, just like he had with me the day before. He was opening the floor to everyone. The race was on. He dropped a stack of materials on each of our desks and left without another word. There were no specific instructions, but the other 4 people in the room were veterans at this. They had written countless speeches before. They knew the format, the tone, and the expectations. Whether their work would actually be chosen, however, was a different story. The moment Zhao Zifeng's footsteps faded, the secretariat office exploded into a frenzy. Writing a speech for the provincial party secretary meant only one thing. Secretary Kong Chaolin was coming back. He had been away in a sanatorium, recovering his health. His former secretary, Song Gang, had already been reassigned to a position outside the office. The top spot in the first secretariat, the position of chief, had been vacant for a long time. "Do you think Secretary Kong will hire a new personal secretary?" One of them whispered, eyes gleaming. "I'm going to fight for it." "Give it a rest," another scoffed. "I heard Secretary Kong is planning to retire to the second line. That's why he sent Chief Song away. Well, I guess we call him Magistrate Song now. But even if Kong retires, a new secretary will take over, and his personal secretary will become our new chief. That's the tradition. Are you new here or something?" I didn't care about their bickering or their office politics. It had nothing to do with me. I turned back to my desk and began combing through the research I had gathered over the past year. I refined my draft, sharpening the edges and tightening the logic. I knew this wouldn't be easy. A speech for the top leader of the province wasn't something you just finished. For the annual economic conference, a draft usually went through 10 or more revisions. The Secretary General would be the one gatekeeping the final version. There was a clear distinction between the governor and the party secretary. The governor's speech was a report, full of data, analysis, and concrete work arrangements. It was about execution. But the party secretary's speech was different. It was about instructions. It was about setting the direction, grasping the big picture, and interpreting the spirit of the central government. The governor handled the work, the secretary handled the politics and the manifesto. By the third day, everyone was working like possessed souls. Everyone wanted to shine. I had finished my draft, but I wasn't satisfied. I went over it again and again, checking every comma, every period. Something was missing. I realized what it was. The political ideology was too weak. I needed to bridge the gap between high-level policy and the lives of the people. If I framed the improvement of the people's livelihood as the ultimate goal, it would make the political vision feel real and achievable. Trust from the masses was the only thing that could truly support a political ideology. It would showcase the wisdom and greatness of the leadership. That was the key. I went back into the draft and added specific targets for household income and a description of the happiness index. I wanted it to be practical, not just fluff. I sat at my bulky, old-school computer and started typing. I skipped lunch, working straight through the afternoon to condense the text. Usually, these speeches lasted 2 hours. Given Secretary Kong's health, I squeezed it down to 10,000 words, exactly 1 hour of speaking time. I printed it out on 10 pages. I chose a larger font size, a number 3 font, because I knew Secretary Kong was nearly 60. His eyes probably weren't what they used to be. At 3 o'clock sharp, I headed up to the 8th floor to Secretary General Zhao Zifeng's office. I figured he'd just be getting back to his desk and would have time for a quick meeting. My heart was pounding. I was confident in my work, but leadership often sees things from a perspective I couldn't imagine. "Chief Su, is the Secretary General free?" I asked. Su San, a man in his 30s, was Zhao Zifeng's personal secretary. He was a high-ranking official himself, but he was surprisingly humble. He knew people from the secretariat would be dropping off drafts today. Usually, he'd just collect the papers and send them away, but he knew Zhao Zifeng had a soft spot for me. "Wait a second, Xiao Chu. I'll go check," he said. A moment later, he gestured toward the door. "The boss says come in." I walked in to find Zhao Zifeng sipping tea. "Good afternoon, Secretary General. I'm here to submit my draft." I stepped forward and handed the papers to him with both hands. "Finished already?" He looked surprised. "I worked some overtime," I admitted, feeling a bit sheepish. If my draft isn't good enough, I wanted to leave enough time for the better writers to step in. Also, considering Secretary Kong's health, I compressed it to 1 hour. "Thoughtful," he noted, nodding. "I'll take a look." I thanked him, nodded to Su-sun on my way out, and headed back down. As soon as I left, Zhao Zifeng picked up my draft. It was my first real assignment, and he was curious. Half an hour later, Zhao Zifeng was sitting in Secretary Kong Chaolin's living room. The secretary was resting at home, looking healthy but taking things slow. On the coffee table sat the 10 pages I had printed. "Secretary, this kid has some real substance in him," Zhao Zifeng said, a wide grin on his face. I didn't realize we had such a talent hiding in the first secretariat. He had been genuinely shocked when he read it. He had originally intended for me to just practice, but I had handed him a masterpiece. Usually, these drafts were a headache that made his blood pressure spike. This one was different. "He really is a talent," Kong Chaolin mused, looking over the pages. "He joined last year, right? How did we miss him? He's certainly living up to that master's degree." Zhao Zifeng laughed and shared the story of how I had been awkwardly sidelined during my initial placement. Fortunately, I stepped in and put him in the secretariat. It's not too late to use him now. Suddenly, Kong Chaolin's expression darkened. Zhao Zifeng knew exactly what he was thinking. A man at Kong's level was sharp. If I had been in that office for a year and the former secretary, Song Gang, had never once asked me to write a single report, it wasn't an oversight. It was a deliberate suppression of talent. It was a major stain on Song Gang's record. "Zifeng," Kong Chaolin said after a long silence. "Have you looked into this kid's background?" "I have. It's simple. Just him and his mother," Zhao Zifeng replied. "Look into it more," Kong instructed. "It never hurts to know everything." Zhao Zifeng nodded, knowing exactly what this meant. I was no longer just a face in the corner of the office. My time had finally come. Regardless of whether I became Secretary Kong's temporary or permanent secretary, Zhao Zifeng knew he had struck gold. He was the one who discovered me. In the eyes of the big boss, Zhao's standing would surely rise. Plus, he had always looked out for me, and he knew I was the type to remember a favor. A secretary's rank might not be high on paper, but the secretary to a provincial party secretary was a different breed entirely. Having a good relationship with the man standing next to the power throne made everything easier. It was nearly 6 in the evening, and the two provincial heavyweights, Kong Chaolin and Zhao Zifeng, were still poring over my draft. They hadn't expected a kid like me to have such a powerful grasp of the written word. I was an economics major, yet here I was, threatening to take the bread out of the mouths of professional speechwriters. "His political sensitivity is incredibly high," Kong Chaolin remarked. He hadn't been this happy since he entered the sanatorium. His years in politics told him that once this speech was delivered, it would send shockwaves through the national political scene. Some of the concepts I had proposed were things even he hadn't considered. This wasn't just a speech anymore. It was a blueprint for the future development of Jiangdong province. He saw me as someone worth cultivating. As an old party member, he felt it was his duty to foster talent for the country. He didn't realize yet just how much this single speech would change things, or that it would give rise to a new kind of political star. For now, he treated it as his secret weapon. He told Zhao Zifeng to keep the contents strictly confidential, even from me, other than for work coordination. Zhao Zifeng left shortly after. He hadn't brought a driver, so he got behind the wheel himself, his mind still racing with the implications of my draft. At 45, he was a deputy provincial-level official, a position others envied, but he knew how precarious his footing was. He was an outsider here, originally a mayor from Beiwa province. Back then, he had been full of ambition, ready to make his mark, but his backers had failed him at the critical moment. His primary support had come from his wife, Chinju's family. Being from a grassroots background, he had been the sacrificial lamb in a political compromise. The Chun family chose to back someone else, and he was sidelined, eventually landing the Deputy Secretary General role in Jiangdong only through the help of an old mentor. It marked his break from the Qin family. He knew Kong Shaolin was a man of vision and character, but Kong was getting older, and his path forward was narrow. In politics, there are only so many seats at the top. The governor, Zhang Jiehui, came from a powerful family in Yinqing, but since Zhao's roots were tied to the Qins, he knew the governor might not trust him. Kong Shaolin was his best bet. For the last 3 months, while Kong was in the sanatorium, Zhao had felt a sense of despair. But Kong's return and my sudden emergence gave him a glimmer of hope. He decided to gamble. Usually, people bet on their superiors, but Zhao decided to bet on me, the subordinate he had picked up by chance. He needed to make me shine, and he needed to do it fast. He sensed that Kong's time in Jiangdong was winding down. He liked me. I was smart, clean, and hardworking, though I lacked ambition. To him, that lack of ambition was both a weakness and a strength. He knew once Kong took an interest in me, the old man would handle the grooming. His job was to make sure I became the #1 secretary of Jiangdong before the provincial conference. The next morning, Zhao Zifeng called me into his office. We sat on the sofas rather than at his desk, keeping the atmosphere informal. I had been anxious all night because I hadn't heard a word about my draft. "Xiao Chu," Zhao said, catching my eye. "The draft you wrote. Secretary Kong has approved it. He's going to use it. However, the contents must remain confidential." I felt a massive weight lift off my chest. I had been in the first secretariat for over a year. I knew the rules of secrecy. "Thank you for the opportunity, Secretary General," I said with a self-deprecating smile. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known I was even capable of writing a leader's speech. At least now I know I'm not completely useless in the office. "You underestimate yourself," Zhao replied, sipping his tea. "That draft was brilliant." Secretary Kong praised it highly. "That's no small feat." He paused, looking at me intently. "Xiao Chu, what are your thoughts regarding your work?" "I don't have any specific thoughts," I admitted. "I'll follow the organization's arrangements. I don't know many people in the provincial compound. When I first arrived, I was practically a local laughingstock. If it weren't for you, I might have ended up on the streets." I made sure to voice my gratitude. In this world, being labeled ungrateful was a death sentence. "I'm planning to recommend you as Secretary Kong's personal secretary," Zhao said, cutting straight to the point. "It'll give you a chance to use your knowledge and talent. What do you think?" He was testing the waters, but we both knew he was really just giving me a heads up. I kept my face calm, though my heart skipped a beat. "I'll do whatever the organization decides." "But isn't it rumored that Secretary Kong is leaving Jiangdong?" Zhao nodded inwardly at my composure. Most young men would be jumping for joy at the prospect of being the top secretary in the province. Don't listen to rumors. Things change. As long as Secretary Kong is in Jiangdong, he needs a secretary. A man of his stature can't be expected to carry his own bags, can he? He didn't spell everything out, but I got the message. When I walked back to the first secretariat, my head was spinning. The rumors said Kong was retiring to the second line, which was why his previous secretary had been reassigned. Now, the wind had shifted, and I was the one standing in the path of the storm. The Jiangdong Economic Conference was set for December 6th, a lucky date. With only 5 days left, the entire compound was in a state of chaotic energy. Every department was scrambling, but one thing struck everyone as odd. Everyone had submitted their drafts for the secretary's speech, yet there had been no feedback at all. Usually, by now, the revisions would be flying back and forth, but this time, there was only silence. Usually, a major speech for the provincial party secretary goes through dozens of drafts. The secretariats are normally jumping through hoops, frantic and stressed. But this time, it was different. Zhao Zifeng was in a great mood. Secretary Kong Shaolin had recovered and was out of the hospital, and Zhao had discovered a real talent in me. Zhao had served several leaders, and he knew a good fit when he saw one. He was convinced Kong would be satisfied with me as his personal secretary. In Jiangdong, Zhao was considered an outsider, and Secretary Kong was his only real backer. For him, things were finally looking up. He sat in his office, sipping Longjing tea and humming a little tune. His phone started ringing. It hadn't stopped for days. With the big conference approaching, the schedule was packed for every leader in the province. Every city and county chief was trying to pull strings, calling their contacts to fish for info about the meeting. They weren't just curious about policy. They wanted to know if their jobs were safe. In our world, the political ecology shifts after a big meeting. If you've been in one spot for a few years, you're likely on the chopping block. Those who get the inside scoop early can start making moves to save themselves. Those who don't, they're left out in the cold. Zhao picked up the receiver. Secretary Hua. Hello. He leaned back in his chair, smiling. Oh, you're in Jiangming? Dinner? Sure. But you have to bring your daughter. I'll bring young Chu. I can't just eat for free, right? I have to do something to earn my keep. He laughed, sounding genuinely happy. I asked Xiaochu a few days ago. Those two haven't even contacted each other yet. We need to give them a little push, kickstart the economy of young love. He finished the call and set the time for 6:30 p.m. at Tianyi Pavilion. Hua Jiqing, the party secretary of Hefeng County, was definitely calling to dig for information. That put Zhao in a tough spot as the housekeeper of the provincial committee. He couldn't leak secrets, so he decided to play matchmaker instead. On the other end, Hua Jiqing felt something was off. He had invited Zhao to dinner, so of course it was his treat. But Zhao sounded so cheerful it was hard to say no. He called his daughter, Hua Yueran, and told her to get ready. Zhao called me next, asking me to accompany him to a dinner party. I called my mom to tell her I wouldn't be home for dinner. Honestly, I hadn't been to a social dinner in a year. I didn't like them, and nobody ever invited me anyway. But Zhao was my direct boss and had looked out for me. I couldn't say no. Tianyi Pavilion was a famous high-end business hotel in Jiangming. It was expensive, which meant it was quiet and private. The soundproofing was top-notch, perfect for sensitive business. When I walked in, I was stunned by the luxury. I could never afford a place like this on my own. We entered VIP Suite 888. Two people stood up to greet us. One was Hua Jiqing. The other was a young woman. She was stunning, tall, elegant, with a face that could stop traffic. But she was cold. Her pale blue dress matched the icy expression on her face. A total ice queen. I felt a wave of embarrassment hit me. The Secretary General had given me her number months ago, and I had never called. I realized then that I wasn't just a guest. This was a blind date. Zhao and Hua Jiqing shook hands and chatted. When it was my turn, Zhao introduced us. Secretary Hua's daughter, Hua Yueran. She's a teacher at Jiangming No. 1 Middle School. Then he pointed at me. Chu Dongheng, from the first secretariat. I couldn't play dumb. That would just make it more awkward. Hello, Teacher Hua. Good evening, I said. She seemed to realize what was happening too, and a faint blush touched her cheeks. We sat down, and the food arrived quickly. Zhao had brought 2 bottles of his own mitai. The men started drinking while Hua Yueran stuck to juice. After 3 rounds of toasts, Zhao got down to business. Old Hua, how's work? The way he called him, Old Hua, showed they were close. In fact, Hua Jiqing probably wouldn't have reached his current position without Zhao's support. It's good, Hua Jiqing smiled. That's why I'm here to report to my leader. Cut the crap, Zhao laughed. Reporting is an excuse. You're here to fish for news about the economic conference and Secretary Kong. Hua Jiqing didn't deny it. Well, if there's news, I'm listening. You wouldn't keep a small thing like that from me, would you? We all know Secretary Kong is out of the hospital, but we haven't heard a single word about his instructions for the conference. It's strange. I listened quietly, finally understanding the play. Hua Jiqing had talked to people from other cities, and everyone was in the dark. I know the details, Zhao said, his voice dropping. But I can't tell you. That's why I brought Xiaochu along, to pay for my meal with a favor. He laughed, though I noticed Hua Yueran looked a bit annoyed by the joke. Zhao leaned in. I'll tell you this much. Only 3 people know the contents of the speech. Secretary Kong, myself, and Xiaochu. Anyone else trying to find out is just wasting their time. Hua Jiqing looked stunned. He stared at me, confused. Why would someone as unimportant as me know the secrets of the province? Zhao enjoyed the shock on his friend's face. Don't look so surprised. The reason Xiaochu knows is because he wrote Secretary Kong's speech himself. The room went silent. Hua Jiqing was floored. I was just a master's graduate, a newcomer who had been invisible until now. To suddenly write the keynote speech for the provincial secretary? That was unheard of. He realized then that Zhao hadn't just brought me here for a date. He was sending a massive signal. I had entered Secretary Kong's inner circle. This young man, me, was someone to be reckoned with. The blind date was suddenly the least important thing in the room. The real news was that the most important document in the province was currently locked inside my head. The atmosphere in the room had shifted completely. The realization that I was the one who wrote Secretary Kong's keynote speech hung in the air like heavy smoke. It was clear now that the political landscape of Jiangdong province was about to undergo a massive earthquake, and I was standing right at the epicenter. Secretary Kong had kept the contents of this speech a total secret. Not a single word had leaked. This had driven the local officials crazy, and honestly, I couldn't blame them. In our world, information is survival. Everyone was terrified of losing their chair if they didn't know which way the wind was blowing. Kong wasn't trying to be cruel. He just knew that if the draft leaked too early, the message would get twisted by people with their own agendas. The rumors were flying so thick that people were even trying to bribe their way into finding out who Kong's new personal secretary would be. Zhao Zifeng, as the Secretary General, had been dealing with these vultures for weeks. He looked exhausted just thinking about it. As the night went on, we finished a bottle of wine between the three of us. Hua Yueran remained a composed listener, her cold, elegant demeanor never wavering. We were all feeling the alcohol, and the conversation drifted away from dry politics toward more personal territory. Xiao Chu, I didn't expect you to have such a high tolerance, Zhao Zifeng said, leaning back. To be honest, Secretary General, I don't really drink white spirits, I admitted. I didn't know how much I could handle. I guess I've just been keeping pace with you two tonight. I wasn't lying. I had no reason to. They looked at me with genuine surprise. A man who had never really touched Baijiu was holding his own against two seasoned veterans. I picked up my glass and looked at Zhao. Secretary General, I'd like to toast you. Thank you for looking out for me this past year. If you're toasting me, drop the formalities, Zhao corrected me with a smile. We're off the clock. I raised my glass higher. Then I'll call you Uncle Zhao. I never knew my own father, don't even know his name or how old he'd be. So I'll just say cheers. I said it on purpose. If this was a setup for a blind date, I needed to get my family background out in the open. Zhao didn't say a word. He just tilted his head and drained his glass. I knew he had already vetted my file before I entered the secretariat. The background checks for the inner circle are brutal. They have to be. It's the rule. I refilled Zhao's glass, then my own, and turned to Hua Jiqing. I'll call you Uncle Hua as well. This one's for you. We both downed the spirits in one go. The table went quiet. My comment about not knowing my father had dampened the mood, but I could tell Zhao was watching me closely. He knew I was smart enough to realize what this dinner was about. He wanted to see how I handled myself, and perhaps he wanted to hear the parts of my story that weren't in the official file. After all, if I was going to be the personal secretary to the most powerful man in the province, there could be no secrets. I looked at Hua Yueran. She was watching me. Her curiosity finally piqued. Teacher Hua, I started. Since our elders are so concerned about us, I should probably tell you a bit about myself. Uncle Zhao knows the basics, but the official records don't tell the whole story. Why so formal? Zhao laughed. It's a date, not a briefing. Well, Uncle Zhao, I'm a man with a bit of a history, I joked. She told me she would always remember me. In that world, always remember means it's over. We're done. Is that official enough for you? Which family was she from? Zhao asked. He was sensitive to the names of the powerful clans. I hesitated. I hadn't planned on saying it. But at this point, there was no turning back. The Jin family. From the capital. The room went still again. A 22-year-old master's graduate from a broken home trying to date into a capital elite family? It was a recipe for disaster. You're only 22 and you've already finished your master's, Zhao said, trying to steer the mood. You're not doing badly for yourself. Once you rise through the ranks, maybe they'll be the ones who regret it. I knew Zhao was fishing for more information, likely to see if I was fit for the promotion he had in mind. I know people wonder how I graduated so early, I said, deciding to be open. It's simple. I didn't go through school the normal way. I skipped 2 grades. When I was in 4th grade, I finished the 5th grade curriculum on my own and started crashing 6th grade classes. I chuckled at the memory. I tricked the principal into letting me take the exams with the 5th graders. I told him if I placed in the top 10, he had to let me move straight to 6th grade. I ended up 8th in the whole grade. The other 5th graders hated me for it. A school should be proud of a student like that, Hua Yueran said, her teacher instincts kicking in. The school was, I replied. But the teachers used me to shame the other students. I became the public enemy of the entire school. The pressure on the older kids was immense because of me. And the second time you skipped? She asked, her curiosity now fully engaged. Junior high, I said. I skipped from 7th to 9th grade. That one wasn't easy. Most people study hard. I studied like my life depended on it. That's how I ended up taking the national college entrance exams before I was even 16. I spent 6 years finishing my bachelor's and master's degrees back to back. To anyone watching, I looked like a god-tier genius. Even Hua Yueran, the elegant teacher sitting across from me, had eyes full of admiration. She asked me questions with the tone of a curious student interviewing a legend. A faint sadness flickered across my face. I looked at Secretary General Zhao Zifeng and Secretary Hua Jiqing. What do you two think? I asked quietly. Definitely a genius, Zhao said without hesitation. The literal definition of the neighbor's kid that every parent envies, Hua Jiqing added. They spoke in unison. I let out a dry, hollow laugh. You think I'm a genius? No, you're both wrong. I picked up my wine glass and drained it in one gulp. The bitterness matched the memories swirling in my head. I felt like I was looking back at a different life, one covered in dust and struggle. I took a breath and spoke slowly. I didn't skip grades because I was brilliant. I did it because I had no money for tuition. The table went dead silent. The shock on their faces was palpable, but I didn't look at them. In that moment, the high-end restaurant disappeared. I was back in the small, cramped rooms of my childhood. When I was little, it was just me and my mom, I said, my voice soft and lonely. We lived in a tiny village. When it was time for elementary school, she moved us to the town. She set up a small street stall just to scrape together enough coins for my fees. Later, when I got into the county's top middle school, she set up another stall. But I noticed something. Every few months, a piece of her jewelry would disappear. First the rings, then the earrings, then the necklace. By the time I graduated, she had nothing left. I paused, gripping the table. When I got into the provincial high school, she stopped running the stall and found work as a teacher at a private primary school. She's worked there ever since. When I finished my master's, my advisor was being transferred to Yanda University in the capital to lead a PhD program. He asked if I wanted to follow him. I asked my mom. She refused. She almost hit me for even suggesting it. Why the civil service then? Hua Yueran asked softly. 2 reasons, I replied. First, it was my mother's dream. Second, when we lived in the village, people bullied her. Especially the village chief. My mother used to carry a wood-chopping axe every time she left the house. She was prepared to fight anyone who touched her. Eventually, the village elder, a man of high standing, saw what was happening. When the next election came, he rallied the villagers and voted that chief out of office. I realized then that power protects. I joined the government because I never want anyone to bully my mother again. It's that simple. The dinner ended on a heavy, reflective note. For Zhao Zifeng, my story was the final piece of the puzzle for my background check. For Hua Jiqing, the political stakes were clear, but for his daughter, something else had happened. Maybe it was the tragedy of my childhood or the strength I had to show, but I could see a shift in Hua Yueran's eyes. It was a mix of deep affection and a natural maternal instinct to protect me. I felt it too, and I wouldn't have told her all of this if I didn't trust her. Later, as the older men moved to the tea room, the atmosphere changed. The currents are moving under the surface now, aren't they? Hua Jiqing asked Zhao. Yes, Zhao replied. Since Secretary Kong's future is unclear and the details of the economic conference haven't been leaked, everyone is on edge. Who would have thought a single speech draft would stir up the entire Jiangdong political scene? This kid, Chu Dongheng, he hasn't even officially shown his face yet, and he's already turned the province upside down. Is he really that important? Hua Jiqing whispered. If nothing goes wrong, he will be Secretary Kong's personal secretary, the #1 secretary of Jiangdong. Kong has been here for 3 years, but he's lacked the right spark to ignite his reforms until Chu's speech gave him that spark. The secretary is fired up and has already signaled to the top brass that he wants to groom Chu personally. The central government might stay quiet for now, but once that speech is delivered, they'll have no choice but to agree. While they discussed my political weight, I was oblivious, walking with Hua Yueran in a small park near the restaurant. We didn't talk about politics or the future. We laughed about social trends and told jokes about work. It felt like a real date. I walked her home and didn't get back to my own place until 11 p.m. My mother, Chu Jinluo, was waiting. I usually kept a strict schedule, so my lateness surprised her. But when she saw the look on my face, she smirked. "Look at you, glowing like that," she teased. "Did you finally go on a date with a girl?" "Maybe," I admitted, rubbing the back of my neck. "Really? Is she pretty?" "She's beautiful," I said. "Almost as beautiful as you. Just a tiny bit less." I held my thumb and forefinger an inch apart. "Actually, if I used you as the standard for a girlfriend, I'd be single forever. My mom is way too talented and gorgeous." She laughed, clearly pleased. "Stop flattering me. Tell me who she is." "Her name is Hua Yueran. She's the daughter of the Hufeng County Secretary. Secretary General Zhao introduced us." "Bring her home soon," she said, her eyes lighting up. "Every mother wants a daughter-in-law." "Mom, we just met tonight. I don't even know if she likes me yet." "Oh, please," she said, tossing her head back like a proud peacock. "My son is the best. How could she not like you?" I just shook my head, laughing. To the rest of the world, I was a rising political star or a tragic genius. But to her, I was just her son, and she was ready to fight the world for me. Meanwhile, across the city, Zhao Zifeng was sitting on Secretary Kong Chaolin's sofa, giving a final, detailed report on everything that had happened that night. The wheels were turning, and my life was about to change forever. Secretary General Zhao Zifeng spent the morning updating Secretary Kong Chaolin on my background. He made sure to emphasize that my family history was politically clean. That was the most important thing. "How are the preparations for the conference going?" Kong asked. "Almost finished," Zhao replied. "The staff at the general office have been working overtime. I hear some people at the lower levels are getting restless," Kong noted, his voice calm but sharp. "A little," Zhao admitted. "It's to be expected. You haven't been at the provincial committee compound for months, and there hasn't been a clear statement about your future. Everyone is desperate for a hint about the direction of the upcoming conference. They have their own ideas." Kong nodded. He understood. If he didn't show his face soon, rumors would spiral out of control. "Fine. I'll head to the compound this afternoon. But I don't want to hear work reports from anyone. You handle the gatekeeping. At 3:30 p.m., bring that kid to my office. We need to talk." Zhao knew what this meant. I was about to make my debut. As the first secretary of Jiangdong, I had to stay calm. If Kong could maintain his position, my rise would be unstoppable. But the stakes were high. The position of a provincial secretary was something the powerful families in the capital fought over like wolves. They used every dirty trick in the book for a mere department-level job. For a seat like Kong's, it was a total war. Kong had spent his recovery time studying the speech I wrote. The development concepts I had proposed were innovative, even aggressive. They were unlike anything ever seen in the country's political history. He was betting everything on my words. He believed this speech would win him the support of the central government and secure his tenure in Jiangdong. At 3:25 p.m., 5 minutes early, Zhao led me toward the secretary's office. He had already cleared the floor and stationed guards to ensure no one could force their way in. Kong Chaolin wasn't sitting behind his massive desk. He was waiting on the sofa. "Good afternoon, Secretary," I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Sit down," Kong said, gesturing to the sofa opposite him. "Zifeng, you sit too. Let's just chat." Zhao sat, and I followed suit. I couldn't just stand there making a provincial heavyweight crane his neck to look at me. Before I sat, I noticed Kong's tea was low. I quickly refilled his cup, then grabbed paper cups to pour tea for Zhao and myself. Zhao gave me a small, approving nod. I was learning the role of a secretary fast. I sat on the edge of the cushion, back straight, trying to hide my nerves. This was the man who held the power of the entire province in his hands. "Don't be so tense," Kong said, taking a sip of tea. "We're just talking. The Secretary General tells me your family situation is a bit unique." He was starting with small talk, but I knew he was measuring my character. It is a bit different, Secretary, I said with an awkward smile. In my entire family line, there's just me and my mother. I don't know who my father is, and I've never met any grandparents. If it weren't for my mom, I'd think I sprang from a crack in a rock like the Monkey King. I let out a dry laugh. I know the investigators looked into me when I joined the Secretariat. Honestly, I was hoping they'd find something. I want to know where I came from, too. My mother definitely knows, but I don't dare ask. I'd get a beating for sure. Kong burst out laughing. So you're a little monkey, then? Good. You understand filial piety and gratitude. You've worked hard to change your own fate. You're impressive, kid. From that moment on, in private, he started calling me Monkey. Kong picked up the draft of the speech I had written and waved it slightly. Tell me about this. Just speak freely. That was the hardest prompt he could have given me. No specific question, just talk. If I said nothing, I failed. If I said too much, I looked arrogant. I had to find the perfect balance. Secretary, I'll try not to make a fool of myself, I said, feeling a cold sweat break out on my back. I've studied the files, reports, speeches, documents from the central government and other provinces. Most of them focus on flowery language and word innovation. They use new words to dress up old concepts. They understand the surface level of the party's spirit, but they miss the depth of the soul. I started out nervous, but as I spoke, I began to find my flow. Kong stayed silent, listening. Zhao, however, looked like he was about to have a heart attack. He couldn't believe I was being this blunt in front of the big boss. The party's purpose is to serve the people, I continued. How do we do that? By leading them to prosperity. When people are happy, the country is strong. And let's be honest, happiness means having enough money for food, clothes, and a home. To get that money, we need industries to provide jobs. I leaned in slightly. I've looked at the data. Our people are lagging far behind developed nations. Look at our machinery. It's scarce and outdated. We only have 3 ways to get what we need: buy it, build it, or bring in foreign investment. We don't have the foreign currency to buy it all, and we don't have the technology to build it from scratch yet. The only realistic path is to bring in capital. Those with money bring money. Those with technology bring technology. When factories are built, people get jobs and wages. The merchants make a profit, the people get paid, and the government collects taxes. Then, we use those taxes to build infrastructure and improve lives. That is the only way forward. We need to bring in domestic and foreign businessmen, I said, my voice gaining strength. We take their capital and their technology and make it work for us. In professional terms, it's called investment promotion. This is the true depth of our mission. Right now, our task is to liberate our thinking and boost productivity. Attracting investment is the only way to break the chains holding our economy back. I stopped. The room was silent. I realized I had been speaking with a lot of intensity. I looked at the 2 powerful men in front of me and felt a sudden wave of embarrassment. I had just lectured the provincial secretary on political philosophy. I grabbed my glass and took a long sip of water to hide my awkwardness. I worried I had gone too far. Zhao Zifeng looked like he was having a minor heart attack. He was probably thinking I was the boldest brat he'd ever met, pushing the stakes this high. But Secretary Kong Chaolin didn't look angry. In fact, his eyes were shining. He looked at me like I was a rare treasure. Unbelievable, Kong whispered. To have such a deep, targeted grasp of the party's current stage. You truly are a scholar, Dongyang. He leaned back, smiling. With talent like yours, your future will be limitless. Tell me, why didn't you stay in academia? My master's supervisor actually begged me to stay in Beijing for a doctorate, I admitted. He offered to make me a tutor or an economic scholar. But I knew myself. I don't have the cunning of a strategist or the raw power of a warrior. Besides, my mother wouldn't let me. Kong laughed. Your mother wouldn't let you? She told me I could go back to Beijing once I became a national leader. I joked. I figured I had a better chance of researching how to get to Mars than hitting that goal. Don't sell yourself short, Kong said, his voice serious. You are an elite among your generation. If our country has more young men like you, why should we worry about the future? Secretary General, what do you think? Zhao Zifeng didn't hesitate. He's remarkable. To have this kind of big-picture thinking at his age, it's rare. Kong gave Zhao a knowing look. Secretary General, don't think he's told us everything. This kid still has more stock hidden in his belly. I tried to play it cool. No, my knowledge is limited. I'm empty now. Kong didn't buy it. He gave me a look that said he wasn't letting me off the hook. He was like an old fox trying to squeeze every last drop of wisdom out of a younger one. I looked at Zhao for help, but he just gave me a sympathetic shrug. I was on my own. Secretary General. I do have some thoughts, I said tentatively. But this involves specific government operations. If people hear a kid like me pointing fingers at how to run the province, it might cause trouble. This is exactly what I want to hear, Kong said, his excitement visible. Point away. It's just the three of us. Nothing leaves this room. I took a deep breath. It's like slow cooking meat. If the time is too short, the flavor doesn't come out. If it's too long, the meat rots. Local management is the same. We need a 3 to 5 year plan. Look at the special economic zones in the south. They work. But if we pick just one county here to be a special zone, the others will get jealous. I paused to gauge their reaction. They were leaning in, hanging on every word. So, we don't call them special zones, I continued. We call them development zones. Every city and county designates a specific area for investment. We cluster the factories together for better management. We set up specialized investment promotion bureaus at the local level and an investment promotion department at the provincial level. We make the intent clear to everyone. I added one more detail. And we raise the rank of the people in charge. The head of a development zone should be a member of the local standing committee. Give them real power. Kong Chaolin, the normally stoic provincial secretary, actually slapped the table in excitement. Good. What else? One last thing, I said. We need clear policies, laws that protect these investors. Without a legal safety net, no one will bring their money here. Kong looked like a child who had just been given the best toy in the world. He didn't look like a man who had just left the hospital. He looked like a general ready to charge into battle. Secretary General, Kong turned to Zhao. What is Dongheng's current rank? He's at the section level, Zhao replied. Since he was a master's graduate, I gave him the highest entry rank possible to keep him from being pushed around by other departments. Kong frowned. Section level is too low. My personal secretary needs to be the head of the first secretariat. That requires a deputy division rank. But he's only been here a year. Promoting him 2 levels at once. It breaks the standard procedure. He looked at me, a mix of pride and frustration on his face. I was barely in my 20s, and I was already becoming a political headache for the most powerful man in the province, simply because I was too good to keep at the bottom. Promoting me to a deputy division rank after only 1 year of work was unheard of. It broke every record in the country. Kong Chaolin didn't even bother asking for my opinion. He just waved his hand with the authority of a man who ruled the province. From now on, you are my personal secretary, Kong declared. He turned to Zhao Zifeng. Start him at the deputy division level. If there are vacancies in other departments, let him hold a concurrent post there too. He starts officially tomorrow. I listened to them talk, my heart racing with pure joy. I wasn't an overly ambitious man, but a higher rank meant a bigger paycheck. For someone like me, this felt as monumental as a wedding night or seeing my name at the top of the imperial examination results. We talked until the sun began to set. Before I left, Zhao Zifeng pulled me aside for a private lesson. He told me the secrets of being a top-tier secretary. Listen more, speak less. Keep your eyes on 6 directions and your ears open to 8. He taught me how to handle visitors and how to guard the boss's schedule like a state secret. When the boss gets out of the car to meet someone of equal rank, stay exactly 2 to 3 steps behind him, Zhao instructed. Any closer is disrespectful to the guest. Any further, and you're diminishing your boss's status. You are his image now. Everything you do reflects on him. I was now the #1 secretary of Jiangdong. When I got home that evening, I grabbed my mother and gave her a huge kiss on the cheek. I told her the news. Her eyes lit up with pride. We had survived on nothing but each other for so long, and seeing her happy was the best reward I could ask for. Later that night, I crawled into bed and pulled out my phone. I messaged Hua Yueran. I called her dear, and she teased me, asking if I was bold enough to use that word without having good news to share. We went back and forth, flirting and joking. She asked who my #1 woman was. I told her it was my mother. That seemed to satisfy her. Finally, I dropped the bomb. I told her I was officially Kong Chaolin's personal secretary and had been promoted to deputy division rank. It was supposed to be a secret until the official announcement tomorrow, but I couldn't keep it from her. The news traveled fast. Hua Yueran's father, Hua Jiqing, found out almost immediately. He sat in his house, stunned. He had worked for over 20 years to reach his current rank, and here I was, 23 years old, and nearly catching up to him in a single year. He realized that as the secretary's right-hand man, I was now the most influential person for anyone trying to get an audience with the top leadership. His daughter had a very good eye for talent. December 4th arrived. It was a tense morning, only 2 days before the massive economic conference. Zhao Zifeng walked me into the first secretariat office. "Attention everyone," Zhao announced. "Starting today, Chu Dongheng is the personal secretary to Secretary Kong and the head of the first secretariat." The room went silent. The 4 other people in the office stared at me, frozen. They had treated me like a ghost for the past year, assuming I was just some overeducated kid with no real future. Now, I was their boss. The silence broke when Shun Xueqing, the only colleague who had ever been kind to me, finally spoke up. "Chu Dongheng, Chief Chu, you really kept us in the dark. Don't forget about us now that you've climbed the ladder." I smiled modestly. "It's just a deputy rank, Sister Shun. But we all knew it was more than that." Zhao Zifeng sent out the official fax to every department, city, and county in the province. My name and my phone number were now on the desk of every powerful official in Jiangdong. It was like dropping a massive boulder into a still lake. The entire province erupted. Phones in every government office started ringing off the hook as people scrambled to find out who this Chu Dongheng was. Every mayor and county chief knew that if they wanted to talk to the most powerful man in the province, they had to go through me first. I was no longer a newcomer. I was the gatekeeper. One wrong word from me could set an official's career back 10 years. I had officially become the #1 secretary of Jiangdong. The rumors about Secretary Kong Chaolin leaving Jiangdong died overnight. The province was in an absolute frenzy, and it was all because of me. News spread that the #1 secretary position had been filled by a total dark horse. A year ago, I was a joke, a kid with a master's degree who had been kicked from department to department like a political football. Now, those same department heads who once looked down on me felt a cold shiver down their spines. When people started digging, they were shocked. I wasn't even 24 years old yet. I had just been promoted to deputy division level, rising through the ranks like a rocket. Word on the street was that Secretary Kong was incredibly impressed with me. The underground organization department, the gossip mill of the bureaucracy, was already certain that the secretary's latest brilliant speech had been written by my hand. It explained why no one could leak any details about the upcoming conference. I was the one holding the pen. Back at the provincial office, Secretary Kong's private phone started ringing. It was Governor He Huai. "Secretary Kong, congratulations on your recovery," the governor said, his voice warm but cautious. "Thank you. I'm doing well," Kong replied. "In our world, you always have to say you're doing well. If people think you're weak, they start eyeing your seat. You and the provincial committee dropped a bomb this morning," He Huai laughed. "The whole province is boiling. My departments are being flooded with calls just to find out about your new secretary. Everyone is curious about this Chu Dongheng." Kong laughed heartily. "He's the kid who was bounced around every department in Jiangdong a year ago. Nobody wanted him, so he ended up in the first secretariat. I discovered him there. The boy is a rare talent. It sounds like you're very satisfied with him." "Satisfied? He's the best secretary I've had in my entire career." While the leaders talked, the shockwaves continued to ripple outward. Even the governor was startled by the influence I was already exerting. This was something neither Kong Chaolin nor Zhao Zifeng had fully expected. Down in Hufeng County, Party Secretary Hua Jiqing sat in his office, sipping tea with a look of pure contentment. In politics, everyone wants to move up. With Kong Chaolin staying in power, Hua Jiqing knew his own path forward was clear. He had fought hard for his current position, and without Zhao Zifeng's help, he might have lost it. But now, things were even better. He had a solid relationship with the Secretary General, and the new #1 secretary, me, was currently dating his daughter, Hua Yueran. It was a gift from the heavens. He felt like bursting into song. A secretary to the top leaders might not have a high official rank, but everyone had to give them face. If I called him to ask for a favor, he'd jump to do it. A knock came at his door. It was the county chief, Zhongwen. Usually, the top two leaders of a county don't need an appointment to see each other. It's a sign of mutual respect. As Zhongwen sat down, looking humble, Hua Jiqing felt a flicker of disdain. This old man had spent months tripping him up and making his life difficult. Zhongwen wasn't stupid. He knew about the connection to Zhao Zifeng, but he hadn't expected me to rise so fast. Secretary Hua, Zhongwen said, trying to sound casual. The news about Secretary Kong's new personal secretary is all anyone is talking about. Everyone is asking who this Chu Dongheng is. You seem so calm. Do you know him? Hua Jiqing knew exactly what the old fox was doing. He was fishing for information. It was time to give him a little scare to keep him in line. Zhongwen was 50 years old. When the previous secretary retired, he thought the job was his. Instead, the provincial committee had promoted Hua Jiqing, a man in his early 40s, over his head as part of a youth movement pilot program. Zhongwen had been bitter ever since. Secretary Kong isn't leaving, Hua Jiqing said plainly. His old secretary, Song Gang, has been reassigned. He needs someone to carry his bags and handle his affairs. It's only natural. Zhongwen leaned in. But no one knows anything about this kid. You're close with Secretary General Zhao. You must know more. Hua Jiqing smiled inwardly. Chu Dongheng is only 23. He's a clean, simple young man. He just wants a good salary and a quiet life. I actually had dinner with him and the Secretary General recently. He's a good kid. He didn't mention that I was dating his daughter. That would be playing his hand too early. But even the mention of a private dinner was enough to make Zhongwen's heart race. Zhongwen realized he had made a massive mistake. He and the deputy county chief had been plotting against Hua Jiqing for months. Now he realized that if he kept it up, he wouldn't just lose the power struggle, he'd lose his career. A secretary general is powerful, but a personal secretary to the provincial secretary is the man who whispers in the boss's ear every single day. Hua Jiqing watched the color drain from Zhongwen's face. He knew that from this day forward, the infighting in Hufeng County was over. He could finally stop looking over his shoulder and start building his legacy. With my influence backing him, the next step in his career was no longer a dream. Meanwhile, in Qingsong County, the new county chief, Song Gang, was in a dark mood. As my predecessor, he knew Secretary Kong better than anyone. Seeing me officially take his old spot confirmed his worst fear. The old man wasn't going anywhere, and the power dynamic in Jiangdong had shifted forever. Song Gang had just arrived in Qingsong County. When he first took the job, he was riding high, using his former status as Secretary Kong's man to act like a king. But he was all talk and no talent. His projects failed one after another. Before long, the local officials stopped respecting him. They only tolerated him because they were afraid of his old boss. Then the news hit. Secretary Kong had a new personal secretary. The news hit Song Gang like a ton of bricks. He had come from the secretary's inner circle, yet he hadn't heard a single whisper about my appointment. That was a very bad sign. By early morning, his phone was ringing off the hook. Everyone wanted to know who I was. He knew me, all right. I had spent a whole year sitting at a cold desk in his department, being ignored. As the head of the first secretariat, he had never given me a single assignment. Not even a small one. He realized he had made a fatal mistake. He was narrow-minded and petty, and now he was going to pay the price. He was terrified that I would retaliate. One word from me to the secretary could end his political career forever. He felt like the universe was playing a cruel joke on him, and he wasn't laughing. Meanwhile, at the provincial government building, a high-level meeting had just ended, but nobody left the room. The most powerful people in the province were busy gossiping about me. If I had known what they were saying, my heart might have skipped a beat. Isn't Secretary Kong being a bit reckless? Qin Weiman asked. He was the executive vice governor, a green kid who's been on the job for less than a year, and he's already a deputy division chief? That's going to cause a stir. Qin Weiman was bitter. A year ago, he thought he was a lock for the governor's position. Then the central government sent Zhang Jiahui to take the job instead. He blamed Secretary Kong for not backing him. Now, he was looking for any reason to strike back. Another vice governor, Yu Gu, chimed in. A 22-year-old with a master's degree? We need to verify those credentials. He was just stirring the pot, hoping to see a fire start. Governor Zhang Jiehui saw right through them. He knew they were just trying to use me to get to the secretary. He's just a secretary, Zhang said, trying to downplay it. Besides, he's the only one in the entire provincial office with a full-time master's degree. The promotion is standard for the role. Secretary Kong follows the rules. He wouldn't make a mistake this basic. Then Mei Xiaobing spoke up. She was a vice-governor from a powerful family, and she didn't care about their petty games. She took a slow sip of water, letting the tension build. She enjoyed watching these old men squirm. Little Chu is a bit of a legend, she said with a smirk. Yes, he's 22, but he skipped a grade in elementary school and another in middle school. That's how he finished his master's so early. It's not a mystery. It's just talent. She had gotten the scoop from Zhao Zifeng. She even joked about wanting to steal me to be her own secretary because I was handsome. The men in the room went silent. Lin Mingping, the Secretary General of the government, added another detail. It's funny. A year ago, when he first started, not a single department wanted to hire him. He was rejected by everyone. But Mei Xiaobing wasn't done dropping bombs. The secretary isn't just giving him a title. He's also the chief of the 3rd Organization Division and the 3rd Discipline Inspection Division. Those might look like empty titles now, but if he decides to use them, they have real teeth. The room went cold. This kind of appointment was unheard of. If I had the same last name as Kong, they would have assumed I was his secret son. Governor Zhang tried to calm everyone down, saying it was just about building my resume for the future. But everyone knew the truth. There's no such thing as a small move in politics. I was no longer just a secretary. I was a player. And in this world, you're either at the table or on the menu. Politics is a game of human nature. It's filled with love, hate, joy, and sorrow. But right now, for the various departments and bureaus in Jiangdong province, it was mostly sorrow and a lot of fear. The news of my new appointments hit the government offices like a tidal wave. The officials in Jiangming City were breaking into cold sweats. They remembered how they had treated me a year ago. When I first joined, they played political football with my career, kicking me from one department to another like I was a nuisance. Now, I was the secretary's right-hand man. They were terrified I was coming for revenge. The power being handed to me was staggering. But because it didn't technically break any regulations, no one could openly object. They just whispered in the shadows. Was Old Kong planning something big? He wasn't exactly known for being a fighter, but in Jiangdong politics, you learned to keep one eye open even when you slept. While the province was buzzing, Kong Chaolin wasn't at the provincial office. He was at home. The Provincial Economic Conference was only 2 days away, and he was obsessively studying the speech I had written for him. Secretary General Zhao Zifeng was there with him, giving a report. As per your instructions, Xiao Chu has been appointed as the Deputy Director of the General Office. He's also been given concurrent roles as the Chief of the 3rd Organization Division and the 3rd Discipline Inspection Division. Zhao spoke carefully. Usually, the Secretary's personal assistant being the Deputy Director of the General Office was standard practice. That spot was vacant since Song Gang left anyway. But those other 2 titles? Those were unusual. Even if they were just empty titles on paper, they carried a specific kind of weight. Only Kong Chaolin knew exactly what he was aiming for. Why the 3rd Division for Discipline Inspection? Kong asked, looking up from his papers. Wasn't the chief position for the 1st Division vacant? Zhao cleared his throat. Secretary Wu Yishan from the Discipline Committee said he already had arrangements. He's moving Zhong Wenjie out to be the party secretary of Shirshan County, so the 3rd Division spot just happened to open up.